Hello everybody, it is I, Siberian, and I welcome you once more back to the C# hype train. So I had a look through the comments from last episode, and it looks like the consensus is overwhelmingly on the longer episodes. So I'm not going to be aiming for the 15-minute mark as tightly. And I also did a quick re-math on the remaining posts to go, and I may have slightly overestimated how far behind we actually are. So the plan currently is we're currently about for a fifth of the way through page 13. So we're going to do page 13 today for the 27th. 28th is going to be page 14. 29th is going to be page 15. 30th is going to be 16, and then we'll leave the 31st of March for any leftovers in case we run into anything particularly long that we want to talk about. So that means that we have a little bit more time with the longer episodes and with slightly less that we aim for to discuss the changes, especially for today. So let's get started. So means I get to talk a bit slower. First change for today is going to be fleet distance and time. When a fleet is given orders, the Naval Org window will show both the distance and time required for these orders. So you now know, for example, when vital Galsite shipments will reach your homeworld. See at the top of the screenshot here. Now, one thing that I'd like to point out is that Steve seems to be talking a lot from the Naval Org window. Like, a lot about the Naval Org window. It seems to me like the Naval Org window is getting almost every function of the task groups window. The only thing that seems to be missing... Well, I mean, I'm not really sure there is anything. It's a fleet information, right? You got the locations, you got the orders, you got the time and distance, you've got the commander crew training skills, you got the speed, sensor range, geosurvey information, fuel information, size information, crew, all the ship information for the fleet. You've got the ship list, the movement orders, so you have the full list here of movement orders. You've got the standing orders, the cargoes, the history, and the miscellaneous information about the fleet. You've got the ship overview tab, which presumably shows all the information about the ships themselves. Ship combat is presumably the combat controls. You've got the admin commands tab, the logistics reports tab, a fuel report tab, a repair report tab, information about shipping line, not entirely sure what that is, and then the OOB by system tab that we talked about a little bit earlier, as well as on the left, the full list of all the ships for the Empire. It seems to me like the Naval Org window has almost subsumed the task groups window, because I haven't heard about it in ages. Not necessarily a bad thing. One less separate window that we have to deal with is better, especially considering we can open multiple windows. So we can open like 3 copies of the Naval Org window and have them each set for a specific task force or fleet. Also, I'm so happy that they're now called fleets, not task groups, because task groups and task forces got confusing. So confusing, especially for newer people. I like that they're called fleets. But yeah, it does feel like the Naval Org window has kind of subsumed the task groups window, and I kind of like that change. And Steve hasn't mentioned it, but I kind of like it. Alright. We also have a couple of other enhancements to the Naval Org window, such as tonnage and fleet, which I just mentioned, and total fleet cost, which presumably helps with maintenance requirements, I guess. Okay, let's move along to the next change, fire delay. The fire delay mechanic for inexperienced ships has changed for C#. The delay is about half of what it was in VB6 and is on a bell curve. So the choice was made to reduce the delay because it was never a major issue for long-range missile combat, which is true when missile combat can span literal hours and a 30-second delay is nothing. But it could be a very long time in energy range combat. Also true, in the 30 seconds it takes for your fire delay to sort itself out, combat could be over. The new mechanic reduces the delay overall and makes the maximum delay far less likely. Note that this is not the same as jump delay, which remains the same. A fire delay happens when a ship with less than 100% fleet training either opens fire or changes target. The formula is as follows. So, all rounded, 1 minus fleet training points divided by 500, times 1 minus the reaction bonus, times a random number between 10, times a random number between 10, times 0.5. So, for example, a ship with 20% fleet training, or 100 points, and a 10% reaction bonus would be 0.8 times 0.9 times the random number between 10, times the random number up to 10, times 0.5. So, which is anything from no delay to 36 seconds. With the likely outcomes in the middle of that range. 15 to 20 seconds for a relatively inexperienced ship is long enough to disrupt coordination in a close-range battle, but not so long it is crippling or difficult to accept in terms of reality. A ship with 100% fleet training will suffer no delay, and ships with high percentages are more likely to have no delay. The other thing to consider as well is that even 36 seconds, especially late game, you're going to have beam weapons that probably take longer than that to reload. So you're probably going to see situations, especially if beam ships are salvo firing, you're going to see situations where the 36 seconds or less reload speed is, especially if 36 seconds is with 20% fleet training. With this kind of fire delay, is probably not even going to matter. I see it mattering more when you have fighters in your face, and you have more rapid firing weapons firing more often that might be actually reloading faster than your fire delay. But for big battleship to battleship brawls, I do not really see the fire delay having a big impact. So interestingly enough, this is probably one of the first changes to actually seriously benefit smaller ships. Smaller ships that need more rapid firing weapons to hit would actually benefit from the enemy having a fire delay. So that's a very interesting change. I like it. Big ships get so many buffs that I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, if the big ship buff is actually as big as I thought. Well, as big as we make it out to be. Next option, fleet as text. This is similar to the earlier populations as text function. A new button on the Naval org window, which I actually pointed out earlier, will open a window with a text version of the ships in the fleet. The text lists each ship class in the fleet with the names of each ship of that class alongside. For ships of 1,000 tons or less, the number of ships is displayed rather than the names. This is intended for copying directly into an AAR. I feel a sense of deja vu. I feel like, oh no, this is like a cut down version of the order of battle text that we covered a couple of episodes ago. Alright, next, ground combat hostile force intelligence. So we already covered the rules explaining how you learn about the different classes of hostile ground units. This post covers intelligence regarding the size and composition of the hostile force in a given ground combat zone. After each combat round, an update is provided on the estimated hostile force. The estimate becomes more accurate as time passes. For each type of hostile ground unit on the combat zone, the following process is used. The intel error range is 200 divided by the number of combat rounds. So ultimately, you're going to need 200 combat rounds to get maximum intel. The intel error is 1 plus random number of the integer range divided by 100. So what that amounts to is basically a random number up to half the error range. I don't know. Somebody math it. 50% of the time, the actual number of alien units is multiplied by the intel error, and 50% of the time, the actual number of alien units is divided by the intel error. So it gives you a plus minus in that way. For example, if there are 1,000 units of a particular alien class, the intelligence following the second combat round would indicate between 500 and 2,000 units. After 10 combat rounds, the intelligence reporting range will be 833 to 1,200. I'm wondering if this is each combat round that the troops are on the same planet, or each combat round that they are actually in combat. Because I feel like having troops be on the same planet should give you intel, maybe at a slower rate, if they're not directly in combat. Because, I mean, like, America kind of knows, at least roughly, how many troops and tanks and planes and ships and whatnot Russia has, right? We have a reasonable idea, if not a great idea, of the military might of Russia, and we don't have magical gravity sensors and all that, and future space tech or ships in orbit. So I feel like there should be a way to get this information without being in literal combat. Next, civilian movement restrictions. So a system can be flagged as military restricted on the miscellaneous tab of the galactic map. Once flagged, civilians will avoid the system. Civilians will also avoid any system flagged as alien controlled. Good! No more suicidal civilians. Population can be flagged as military restricted on the civilian economy tab of the galactic map. But once flagged, civilians will avoid the population. This is also absolutely fantastic to stop civilians from being suicidal. If you've watched the guide series, I think in the first or second war with the NPR, we were trying to set up an invasion, try to land the ground units, and the civilians kept trying to ship population to the damn planet, which is stupid. When a system or population is flagged as restricted, any colony ships en route will be diverted to other destinations. So, unlike my guide episode, you don't have to jettison them. Freighters en route will abandon their cargo and seek new trade runs. Okay, well, cargo is insignificant, so that's not a big deal. You will receive a pop-up warning on that basis before confirming the new status. A small note from Steve. In the past, he has been very reluctant to have restrictions on civilians, mainly because this will allow the players to effectively exercise direct control, and consequently the civilians will just become an extension of the government. For example, using the above option, you could restrict every system except the one that you would like civilians to colonize. However, there are many ways to exploit Aurora if that was the goal of the player, so he decided to leave it to players to roleplay their preferred way of handling civilians. So, yeah, this gives a lot of control if you're willing to exploit it. So it's going to be down to us to not exploit it. So, but I feel like this change makes a lot of sense because, I mean, hell, take a look at the world right now. We have governments shutting down airlines and cruise lines and ordering people to not travel to other countries. So, I mean, come on. When the only way to get there is a literal spaceship and walking there is physically impossible, I feel like it would be a hell of a lot easier for a government to exercise more direct control. To basically tell a government to say, no, you are not allowed to fly in these systems because, I don't know, pull a reason out of your hat. I don't care. You can come up with a million reasons why a government could tell a corporation, no, do not fly to this system. Alright, next. Point defense fire control. So VB6 has a restriction that each fire control can only engage a single target during point-blank fire. This restriction has been removed for C#. Each weapon can still only engage a single salvo. In VB6, missiles moved in... hang on. No, we already covered this. I think we already covered this in the combat changes. But it's an absolutely fantastic change. Alright. Tractor any ship. There is now a new order to tractor any ship in fleet. A tug with this order will tractor the largest ship in the target fleet without you having to specify the ship. Another feeling of deja vu here. I feel like I've covered this. This allows you to create an order cycle to move a group of space stations, such as terraforms, fuel harvesters, or... Yeah, I've definitely covered this. Weird. From one location to another without having to specify each ship individually. With the new space station rules in C# Aurora, this happens a lot. So your order was designed to protect... Yeah, I've definitely covered this. Hey, somebody remind me. Have we actually covered this? Hang on, let me check my change list. Okay, so just checked. So tractor any ship... While I swear I remember this, apparently we didn't talk about, but point defense fire control seems to be very similar to when we talked about the final defensive fire changes. So I think this was touched on back when we talked about that. Okay, next change for today, story characters. A commander can be flagged as a story character. A story character will not suffer accidents or ill health and will not be automatically retired. This could be abused for scientists, but we will leave it up to players to decide how they want to use this option. You can also flag a commander as do not promote. The commander will remain in his current rank and not undergo automatic promotion. So, two separate changes, but very, very cool. First of all, the do not promote is fantastic for when you have commanders who are horribly fucking useless. Or who you want to punish because they botched a couple of jobs. So maybe like if you want to turn them into Zap. Yeah, and that's a pretty cool piece of role-playing and kind of functional. But story character, I mean, Steve, just rename it to plot armor and go from there. Yeah, it basically just equips the character with plot armor, which is pretty awesome. Because that way you can have like legendary badasses who you want to develop and grow into role-playing. So it's a very role-playing change, but I really like it. I really like it. Also, I want to find a way to rename story character to plot armor. It totally needs to be called plot armor. Totally. Steve, please call it plot armor. Okay, moving along. Something a bit more technical. So, engine technology progression. So, engine technology has been updated to include a couple of extra early levels that will smooth out the speed progression. In addition, ion has been increased from 12 to 12.5 and plasma core antimatter changed from 60 to 64. So, you can see here the old and new engine progressions. Also not shown, the conventional engine power has been changed from 0.2 to 1 to make the conventional era more interesting. So, two things to point out. First of all, you can see that the increase is roughly 25% for each engine step, except for improved nuclear thermal and magnetoplasma, which are at 28%, and internal confinement. Actually, it looks like every third tech level is 28%, while the rest are 25%. So yeah, every third tech level appears to be a slightly more powerful boost. So for example, the jump from nuclear to improved nuclear thermal, the jump from ion to mag plasma, from mag fusion to internal fusion. I feel like the slightly higher increase should actually come from changing technologies. Like technology types, right? So you got like three different, so you got like nuclear, thermal, nuclear, so you got like a couple of nuclears, so you got 4 techs of nuclear, you've got ion and mag plasma, so ion and plasmas are basically just both plasmas, right? One is firing pure ions one by one, and then mag plasma would be firing them like in bulk, so you got like 2 tech levels of plasma, and then you got 3 levels of fusion, 4 levels of antimatter, and then photonic. I think it would probably make a little bit more roleplay sense if the slightly higher increases were done at the technology type stage. Like the first level of the technology type gives you a slightly bigger kick than the rest of them of that specific type. But, I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, they can be named whatever they want. I mean, these are just labels, so, yeah. Anyway, the second very interesting thing is that conventional has been boosted. So, nuclear thermal used to be power of 5 versus 0.2, which is a colossal gap. Whereas now, even though nuclear thermal is 5, conventional is 1. So it's only a 5 times gap instead of like a 25 times gap. It also makes conventional engines a lot more useful on their own before you actually get nuclear thermal. Not that 1,000 research points is even that much of a roadblock. Like in VB6, there used to be 2,500 for a 25 times boost, whereas nuclear thermal is now 1,000 for a 5 times boost. So, yeah, this progression is going to be a lot faster, assuming you actually have a couple of labs. But starting labs are also going to be worse. So, and you've got so many things to research early on. Alright, power plants have also been updated on the same lines with 2 new additions and minor changes to power ratings. So, read that yourself. Okay, you know what? I said we would do page 13 today, but the next change that we have to cover is the diplomacy rework, which is a 2-parter that goes into next page, and we are already at a significant length. So, we're going to cut it here. And next episode, we are going to start talking about diplomacy. And we might use up that buffer real quick once we get to that. Because this change is massive. But that is it for today. So join me tomorrow where I will continue covering the changes for C# Aurora. And hopefully we can get through them all by the end of March. Down below, links to the official Aurora Discord, Reddit, and the forums where you can join the discussion and the hype. And I will see you next time.